thank you so much. We're thrilled to have you here for this interview, and we're very happy that we did this virtual artist in residency. I think maybe you can just say a few words where you come from, and then we can start talking about your work. And yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm so happy to be here and so glad that I applied for this virtual residency. So my name is Abigail Smithson. I am an artist based in Batesville, Arkansas, which is in sort of the Mid-South region of the United States. And I'm interested in basketball mostly. It's my muse for my work. I kind of use it as a starting point, even if the end result doesn't end up being about basketball or looking like basketball. I use it as a place to come back to over and over again. And I was curious about how basketball existed in Serbia and sort of how it lived there and its history. And that's what brought me to wanting to do this residency. Yeah.
Amazing. And we started already working on this project with exchanging these drawings. And we discussed it a bit before we started recording, so maybe we can just come back again to all that because it was really interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
You said you found this book that you started reading and you connected this with the drawings.
Yes. So I had asked you when I started the residency if you thought it was possible to collect drawings of passes, like in basketball, someone passing a ball to someone else, or anyone's interpretation of that movement. So I do think that passes are the most beautiful part of basketball because it's really the way that a team of individual players are asking for help from a teammate or showing that they need each other over and over again. A pass is saying, I can't do this on my own. I need someone else. And so I really think that that is a beautiful part of the game. And because I also really love the mail, which I've connected to basketball because I believe when you mail something to someone, you're passing something to them. And also you're involving all of these other people in that process that work for the post office that handle what you're passing on. And so it's like this team effort to get the letter or the drawings or whatever it is from one person to another, from one country to another in this case. So I had asked if you would collect drawings of passes from people in Belgrade that then you would then pass to me from Belgrade to Arkansas, and I would use those drawings as material, as raw material for my artwork and incorporate them into something, add to them in some way, and then send them back to you. And during this process, I had been reading different books about the Balkans, about Serbia, and one of them that I found was called Balkan Departures, and it is by, I'm going to look it up, Wendy Bracewell and Alex Drace Francis, and they write about how the best way, I mean, I think that they are focused on the Balkans or focused on Southeastern Europe at the core of their book, but they're talking about how the best way to learn about a place is not from people who go there from the outside to write about it or respond to it, but from people who leave and respond to other places. You can understand that place through them. So this book is like a collection of essays from people who have traveled, who are from the Balkans and have traveled outside the Balkans. And based on their responses to these other places, we can learn more about the Balkans, maybe more accurately than we could from someone from the outside going in to record that place or respond to that place with their preconceptions and their ideas of what the Balkans are like. I'm using quotation marks in case anyone can't see me. So I paired these writings from Wendy Bracewell mostly with these drawings because these drawings are coming, they're departing the Balkans and coming from the Balkans and being mailed there from Belgrade to me. And so I feel like I have to learn from them. I have to think about them. I think in some ways it shows like the universality of drawing that this prompt that I gave to you to give to people in a country that I've never been in gives me similar results to when I'm asking someone that I'm, live with, or, a pass is a pass. And there's different interpretations of it, but it all came back to the idea of a pass. And I liked the idea that they were both foreign and very familiar at the same time. And I think that it was a way of realizing that that's probably not the only thing like that between different parts of the world, that things can be very different and also very similar, and finding a way to understand each other through that process. So pairing those drawings with the writings was something I felt was important to add to the drawings, and then now to send them back so that we can continue to go back and forth.
And also including all these parts of the process that we have to deal with issues with the post office and how we're sending original drawings, because from here we can't really send artwork through email, because, and also now we will see when we are receiving your prints how it's going to go, because our customs is opening everything. So that's also becoming part of the artwork.
Yeah, I really love that. I mean, of course, I think that I understand that that's a frustration on a daily basis to have the post office do that. I also think that it's like this idea of trusting that the drawings will end up where they're supposed to be. And then if they don't, I will make more prints. But this kind of like putting it into the hands of other people, literally, and other governments, postal workers, all of it, just imagining that maybe if my drawings are confiscated, they should be confiscated. Like maybe that's where they're supposed to live, some of them, and then I try again. I think that that adds to the work.
Yeah. So what is your idea how this is going to continue? You were planning to also come to Serbia and to continue working on this?
Yes, I mean, I'd love to. Well, it's funny because I just spoke about how I think going to a place and then responding to it or writing about it isn't the best way to represent it at all. But I think that I really would like to. Well, we had talked about potentially I make cyanotypes, which are sun prints made outdoors with chemistry that's sensitive to UV rays, with found photographs mostly. And so I would really love to maybe do a workshop possibly in Belgrade with cyanotypes, and maybe work with some old photographs of basketball history, if that's something that could be accessible through an archive or something like that. That's something that I'm actually doing here in Batesville. I've only lived here for about, I moved here in August, so about, I guess 7 months. And one of the ways that I'm trying to get to know it is going to the library archives and looking at old yearbooks, college yearbooks from the school that I'm teaching at from like the 1920s, the 1970s, and looking at sort of how basketball teams looked here, and scanning those images and making these prints. So I think that if I can do that in a town in the country that I'm from, even in a place I'm still trying to get to know it, it's certainly something that I could bring to another place too.
Yes, definitely. We will look it up for these archives. I don't know much about it, but I will research it for you, because I'm guessing most of things are in Serbian here, but I will find things and then I can link you and you can Google Translate.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll find a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that the images that I use, the drawings that I ended up using for the exhibition that I'm in now from Serbia, were all the ones that were in color. I mean, 2 in particular were very clearly made by, I think, a child, which felt pretty interesting to me. And I ended up cropping them in a way so it looks like the 2 that were made by kids are like passing to each other, so that, they're kind of oriented in a way that they're kind of handing off to each other, and try to keep a flow between the images. So it kind of felt like the ball was moving between these different images from how they're hung on the wall. So kind of connecting those drawings as well.
Yeah. Are you planning to collect more drawings from people from here, or you will be using some of the rest of the drawings that we sent you, or what are you planning to do?
Yes, I think I will. I mean, if I'm there, I would love to do that more. I think also I'd love to work with the other images that I've been sent. I've just been focusing on a few of them for this show, but I still have them, and I want to work with them as well. So I'd like to do both. And maybe I can ask someone on the plane on the way there or something to do it. I mean, I think it's like a fun thing to as an icebreaker.
Yeah. And now you were part of some show at the moment that just finished with the theme drawings.
Yes, it just went up actually this past Tuesday. And so, yeah, the drawings are up there with 2 other artists that also make work about sports, but in kind of strange ways as well, or non-traditional ways. And so our work is all featured downtown here in Batesville together. And so I have the drawings there, and then I have these large cyanotype prints of women's basketball players from the college as well. So it's all together.
Yeah.
It just came to my mind. It might be working well for us. You coming here, commentating our country, then we can figure out what's the America like. You know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I know according to the book, that's the only way to do it. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like the viewpoint, like you're like a Balkan viewpoint or something like that, is what she's getting at. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting too, because also thinking about each country individually versus as a region and what that's like. But yeah, definitely, if I can do anything to help share information about the United States. Ay.
It's always interesting.
Yeah.
Because this recently started in the training. Just one guy came to practice with us martial arts, and he
Mhm.
basketball for I guess very long time, and he's quite tall and is like interesting story, funny story. He has such a big feet, like huge, and he cannot buy, so he has to buy his shoes, his trainers from asking people like who has this number. So he was buying from a guy who was practicing basketball also, who was a player, some big famous player here.
Okay.
So he bought his shoes, and then he stopped. This guy stopped playing basketball, so he had to sell them. So he was selling the same shoes, and some other guy, also famous basketball player, bought them.
Oh, wow.
So the shoes were going around in the fashion, you know?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a good recycling is good. Reselling. That's so funny. Yeah, I think that like some of the players in the NBA, like some of the best players are from Serbia, Slovenia, Bosnia, but at the All-Star game that they had in February, like the Luka Doncic from Slovenia was like waving to Nikola Jokic from across the room, like trying to get his attention because they have like I mean, they're both around the same age. They have like a bond, whatever. And it's just like thinking about also the connection of being so far from where you're from and like kind of the connections that get built between sort of like your countrymen, the people that you identify with and that they, have a connection because that.
It was so weird to me because we are such a small country here, and we never experienced our presence in the world like anything important. And then the war came, and we were important in very obviously negative way. Yeah, but nevertheless, I remember those players from here becoming famous in the world, like especially NBA, and this was almost like you becoming a part of the movie, like the Marvel movie. That kind of experience, like how is it possible? Like that person that's here, like just few meters from me, is now there. When you were a kid, it messes your mind. Like it's really weird.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just want to say that like that's like a point that I'm in. Oh.
Sorry. I think it's a bit of delay with the sound. So that's like, I know I just wanted to say about this, like how we perceive United States, like from our perspective, especially when we were kids, that was like some magical land out there that you see only in a movie. I mean, it still is in a way that like we don't have the whole picture of it, but especially when you're a kid, like you see it in this special way as a movie.
Yes, and that is so interesting. I think also, I mean, for the NBA as an example of that, I think that is the sort of like the data I'm interested in is how basketball is perceived. I mean, the NBA is kind of like this global entity, so bigger than one country, of course. But I think that this idea that you're both talking about with like, yeah, how could someone from here be in there? This movie is so fascinating. And I think that that's part of like, that can be part of my research about basketball in Serbia. And the history as well, like how maybe, and now you have an MVP, the most valuable player in the NBA is from, I forget the name of his village, but like from northern Serbia, I think. So that's incredible, like trajectory.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, for example, it's so obvious the superiority of NBA players versus everybody else. Like, I don't know now. I'm not following that much basketball now, but I know when I was following, it was quite a long time ago. But when, for example, Vlade Divac and those guys were in their prime, and I remember just the part of my amazement was they were so much better in the NBA from everybody else. And the amazing thing is, how did Vlade Divac and everybody else, Tony Kukoc and those guys, how did they find their place there? And on top of that, how were they so good at being there? Like in an environment that is at such a high level, you know. So that was also some kind of a weird pride, you know, when you're a kid, you take pride in such things, you know. So like, wow, it can be done. It's almost like that, you know. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that like they were as good as the players in the NBA. I mean, they were equal to, I mean, maybe not to Michael Jordan, but no one was. So I think that that it is interesting that is interesting to unpack. I have read and watched a movie about Vlade Divac being on the Yugoslavian team with his teammates, and then Yugoslavia breaking up and having like animosity with teammates that he like loved that were his brothers, and now it's like their countries are fighting each other and they're playing against each other in the NBA, and Tony Kukoc also being a part of that. And just interesting. I mean, there's so much with the NBA being an international league, like there's so much that gets that plays out on the court. And now, of course, we have players from Croatia and from Bosnia and from Serbia and from these places playing against each other every night, and it might not have the same situation that Vlade Divac and Tony Kukoc were up against at that time. But yeah, I mean, I just think that they were really good. Like, I think that sometimes there's this inflation of how great the United States is, or how great maybe players from here are. I mean, not to say that they're not amazing, but that there are amazing basketball players all over. And I also have to say, and I'm just realizing this now, but Nikola Jokic is a beautiful passer. I mean, he's such a beautiful passer. I mean, I knew this before, but I've never made the connection with my work with you all, is that it's incredible. The way he sees the court, the way he delivers the ball to his teammates and finds his teammates on the other side of the court, like a quarterback in football. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I was watching some highlights and some parts again, and his play, and it's amazing. Like, I didn't know. I heard, I knew something, but I was trying to explore a little bit more, and it's amazing. And people who are not in sports in any way don't appreciate it. They have no intuition about how hard it is to make a pass in football, in every kind of sport. Like, that's like special skill. It's not something that you can learn. It's almost like it's creation on another level. Like, you have to be aware of everything that's happening around you, and then you have to just react. And you know, it's almost like you don't know it. You just do something that you don't know that you know, and it just do it. And the magic happens, or it doesn't happen. But when it happens, it's really something magical in sports.
Yeah, but I think it's like, this is important, because like when you were saying like to make a drawing, I started thinking, what does it actually mean? And then he had to explain it to me, because I never played basketball in my life. It's like, for me, this is all like so like conceptual, and I find it fascinating how you're so passionate about it, and how you're connecting it with your artwork, and like all different ways how you're making art out of it. I think this is so interesting. Can you maybe also tell us a little bit more about it? Because we were talking, but maybe like it would be also interesting for other people to hear more.
Sure. So I think that I've always loved basketball, but not always wanted to play it myself. I'm not very competitive, and so I don't think I would survive that much in basketball in a serious way. But I've always found like satisfaction by just like shooting a ball into a hoop. I think that's a really nice movement to do. And it, that was something that I had a hoop when I was little, and I watched the NBA when I was little, and I fell in love with Michael Jordan. I mean, I think I wanted to marry him and I wanted to be him at the same time. Like, I wanted everything. I just thought that watching was really exciting, which isn't normally I think, watching something means you're not doing something. And so, but I felt so exhilarated sometimes by watching these games, like seeing these beautiful passes, seeing these beautiful shots, following the teams and knowing who was competitive, who was going to be, you know, I felt the more I invested myself into it, the more I got out of it. I mean, I was like 8 years old, so I wasn't that aware. I was just like, I like this. But looking back, I think that I found it to be I was an active participant by watching. It gave me a lot of knowledge. And then when I was in graduate school for art, I was at a school that was very focused, sports-wise, was very focused on football, big football school in the southern part of the United States. And I was just thinking that like when I would go to my studio on a game day, there were people that would come with their RVs and bring couches and park and bring couches and set up a whole living room in the parking lot of the stadium with like a small fridge, a couch, a TV, everything. And I was like, these people are so passionate. They feel very strongly about these games. They are doing something. This is an action they're taking. And I was thinking, you know, I'm making all this work, and I think that I could somehow make my fandom, my appreciation for basketball, I could make something of it, and I could do something about it. And so since then, that was in like 2015, 2016, I've been trying to be like an active fan, not just by going to games or watching games or whatever, but by like basketball does something and I do something back. So the NBA picks Nikola Jokic as its MVP. What do I do in response to that? You know, it's not everything that happens, but it's like certain things that I can grab onto, that I can say, this happened in basketball history or current events. Now I get to do something, and I get to give something to the game. I'm not going to play it at a high level. I'm probably not going to play it seriously. What else can I offer to this beautiful game? And so I think that also basketball and art for me are interchangeable in the sense that I think that basketball players are giving us something. They're creating something, like you're saying, Bosco, like they are offering something to us when they go out there and they play in all sports. It's like a cultural offering. And so I think that there's a lot of ugliness in professional sports and a lot of sort of darkness and just shitty things with money and like mass produced everything that's going to destroy the planet. Like I'm fully ready to acknowledge all the harm that's done through sports. But I also think when you come down to it and you strip everything away, like there's so much beauty there and so much creativity and excitement. And I feel that so much like pulsing through basketball. Like sometimes I can just watch it with the sound off. Like I don't need anyone telling me anything. I can just see it, and I can see them finding each other, and I can see them making connections and thinking and then doing. And it's really beautiful. And so I feel like I owe something because of that, because I get to witness this. I have to give something back. And so that's it.
Yeah, so you're creating interaction on many different levels, because like it is personal in a way, but then it becomes more important because you're creating art. So like there is more relations between basketball and art and your personal relationship with basketball. And so like it has this feedback loop that it's becoming from something, it's becoming something else, and it's coming back to something that is more personal, and it has this constant.
Yeah. And more personal and sometimes weird. Like I have definitely made things where I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like I know it's about basketball, but no one else cares that it is. Or, individual events, individual moments that I think are important to acknowledge from basketball history, because basketball history is really like tied into the history of the world and the United States in this really profound way. So learning the history of basketball is also learning about all these other things. And so I kind of feel responsible for that. And very cyclical. I mean, it's a cyclical game, and it's this ball into this hoop, and there's so many things about it that just go around and around and around. And I feel like that's my job as well. And, my great grandfather, he worked for the YMCA in the United States as a basketball coach and doing other things. And then he was transferred to the Philippines and lived in Manila. And that was during that, this is like in the 1920s. This was a period of time where basketball was spreading to Asia through American imperialism, colonialism, through Christianity and missionary work. And the YMCA is a Christian organization. So I think that I feel as though this is in my genes a little bit, that I'm continuing on with this work in a way that I hope is not, because I have issues with how the United States was operating in the world at that time and what they were sort of imposing onto other cultures and countries. And I don't think that the spread of basketball was a natural phenomenon. It was a part of wanting to, just globalize everything. So I think that in some ways, I feel like I'm carrying on this work, but trying to do it in a way that feels not correcting, but operating from a space of critical thinking or based on the history of the country and basketball.
Yeah, but your work is also creating an opportunity to engage with communities and to create workshops and different kinds of activities around it. I think that is really important also.
Absolutely. And I think that there is this idea of sports bringing people together and creating those community events, which I think is very true. Again, sometimes I think that they can be harmful in a lot of ways. And so I don't want to say sports are all good, because I think there's a dark side, but I think that that's part of me wanting to fit into the world of sports, is to also operate as you might through sports, but with art. So creating that community connection through my artwork and engaging with people kind of on the ground in the way that you would if you were playing a game with them.
Yeah, also, I don't think that sport has been given a lot of credit in terms of showing the sublimity of the movement. That's something that is really, I think, most important thing, for me, especially because I can see it and I don't think it's appreciated as much. It's appreciated, okay, it's a collective effort, we are all enjoying, we take pride in it, but okay, I get it. But there are moments that there are certain individuals that are doing some things with the body and with it, for example, ball or whatever the sport is on the level of amazing that is not just a skill. It's so much more than skill, and that's why it's hard to explain. That's why I said it's sublime. And it's usually some subtle things. And people who are in sports, even if they're just actively watching, not play, they can recognize that. And it brings it's not joy, it's more than that. It's the same thing when you enter in the art and then you see the work of art that speaks to you. It's the same thing. It's just something that goes much more above and beyond that highly skillful person. Everybody who is in professional sports is highly skillful, and I experience playing with people who are professional footballers or basketball players. It's impossible to even touch the ball. That if the ball is in their hand or it's just they're doing whatever they want. We are just running around them. Although we are playing with them, you are completely clueless what they are doing. So everybody in the professional sports is on the level of skills is amazing. But again, there are some individuals that are doing something that is unprecedented. And when that happens, that is experience on the level of that can art provide or artwork that can provide. So I remember one who was it was a football player from the era of Maradona, and they were supposed to play a game with Argentina and that time, and they were just doing warm-ups, and they were watching Maradona, I think, just doing with a ball, just kicking it vertically really high, I don't know how many meters, and he was doing it constantly, I don't know how many times, let's say 10 times, which anybody who plays football knows that doing that persistently, it's almost unbelievable. It's like a machine. That's impossible thing to do. And they were all amazed with that, not with anything else. Just looking at him doing that, all the professional players no, I can maybe do it once, twice, maybe if I'm lucky 3 times. But he was doing he owned it. And that kind of a skill, it's more than a skill. That level of understanding that is, well, I don't know. If you ever done it, you will understand it. If you're watching it, you will understand it. And the same is with I'm trying to make a comparison with the art. If you are in the art and when you see the artwork that speaks to you, that is really the artwork, you're going to be with the same reaction, wow, I have to look at it. I'm going to think it for the rest of my life. So I think of the some artworks for the rest. I don't know. From when I saw it, also I'm thinking about some of the passes, some of the moves that I saw in football and basketball and tennis, and I'm still thinking still of them. So it's weird. It's weird happening when it happens. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that I often feel, how did you do that for both? Even if I know how someone made something in an artwork, I still will think, how did you think of that? How did you
Yeah.
think to do that? And I think about that with the passes, like, how did you know? Like, because that split second decision where you, okay, I'm gonna put the ball over there, and how they do it, it's just like, how did you know to do that? So, and I think that that's something that goes back and forth between them, even if I know how.
So anticipating future, because especially with pets, the moment when you do it, it's almost you have to figure out the whole constellation of players in like next 3 to 4, 5 seconds, depends on the pass, or a second. But when you're playing, 1 second is like 3 hours. it's really a long time. And when you know that, and when somebody did it, it's almost like he predicted the future. He's like a god. Like, what did you do? How did you know that? Only the god can do that. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yes, and we get to witness it. I mean, there's been, even sometimes I see something on TV and I'm like looking around like for someone else to have seen that with me, or, I'll call one of my friends and be like, did you see that? Like, I mean, the way that you would, like, I only call people about like horrible things, or about like current, like things I see on TV, they're either horrible or it's like an amazing pass or dunk, or something at the buzzer. Like, there's not a lot in between. It's one of those things. So it's, those are really intense moments where you're like, I just witnessed that. And I think sometimes I feel that way about our artworks. I mean, artworks are, I think, different now because of the internet. We see things online and things like that. But I think that like getting to go to a show in person and see a piece as it was sort of meant to be seen is exciting.
Yeah, also there is difference, little sort of difference between, especially when we talk about NBA players, like comparing to the European basketball players in that time, like the 90s when I was watching Spencer, like they were literally like superheroes. Like the level of physical capabilities were like, come on, like what are you doing? Like it's impossible. So that's one part, and that is amazing. But what is artistic is those subtle things. Like when somebody who can do that, that's something which is almost like we all can do it. What how people, when not in art, sometimes they say about some drawing or some good artwork, even the kid can do it. Like, this is the same. Like it feels like just the ball, I could pass it there, just throw the ball, but it's not. Like for that pass, it's like it takes everything. That's what
it takes a lot of passes to get to that pass. Yeah.
So much, yeah. Understanding, skill, everything, yeah. Appreciation, yeah.
And do you know any other artists who are also using basketball as an inspiration for their art?
Yeah, so part of my practice is I have a podcast where I interview other artists, or just anyone who's looking at sports from like a weird, non-traditional perspective. And so I've interviewed, I mean, a lot of times it ends up being about basketball because I can't talk about other sports the way I can talk about basketball. I can to a certain extent, but it's not the same. So there is like a solid group of artists that are like making work about sports. And it's interesting. I mean, a lot of it is focused sometimes on this like creative crossover. Some of it's focused on like social critique. So this artist in the United States here, Hank Willis Thomas, he makes work where he's comparing athletes that are get sponsorships from Nike and other endorsement deals, and are paid a lot of money to being enslaved. So he has like pictures of Nike branding on a Black athlete's chest, the way that an enslaved person might have been branded by their owner. And of course, the language around sports can be, and I think this is an issue that is probably not just specific to the United States, but is very much in the United States because of how racism functions here, where it's like most of the people who own the teams are white, almost all of them. Like, I think, I don't want to say for sure, but I think in the NBA, almost all the owners, for sure in the in the NFL, the National Football League, it's very skewed. Almost everyone is white. Almost like 70% of the players are African American, and we use the term owner for that. And the value placed on that player has to do with their body, their capabilities with their body, what they can do with their body, which is the reason that during slavery, people people's slaves were sold at different values based on like their physical capabilities. Men were stronger than women, things like that. So it's just like, he is drawing that conclusion. And a lot of times colleges in the United States, at least in the Southern United States, modern day colleges are built on what was formerly a plantation where there were slaves. So where I went to school in Louisiana used to be a plantation. Now that land is meant for the university, but you have players in college playing football and they're not getting paid because they're playing in college and they're mostly Black. They're playing for free. The people who are making the most money from this are white people. There's a lot of parallels. And so Hank Willis Thomas focuses on those parallels as a social critique. That doesn't mean that he's not a sports fan. I feel like almost everyone who's making work about sports that I know loves sports, cares about them, has a story like I have about falling in love with Michael Jordan, whatever it is, they have their own version of that, but they like think that sports can be different or better. And so we can handle sports differently. And so they're thinking about it that way. So yeah, there's like a different angles to unpack there.
Do they at least get free scholarships if they're playing basketball for free, or do they have to get a loan on top of that?
Yes, they get a scholarship. I mean, for the best players, most likely the best players are not going to stay all 4 years to get a degree. They might stay 1 year or 2 year and then go to a professional league. I think that also, like, I mean, at the school I'm going at where I teach, it's not the case because it's not very focused on athletics, but at these larger institutions, it's like they are called student athletes, which is meant to be they're students first and then athletes. But really the demanding schedule of the athletes that are making money for these universities and traveling around and playing these games, and working out and practicing, it's like they are not actually getting what would be considered, in certain sports, like in track and field or other things that maybe aren't so demanding. It might be different, but in certain sports that bring in a lot of money for the college or the university, those players are not getting the experience that they are not prioritizing their academics or getting the chance to. It's twisted and it's complex. And even like, you'd think at my university, there would be a sign that maybe acknowledged what happened on that land before, who owned that land. There's nothing. I mean, it took me until my 3rd year to learn that was a plantation. I mean, and now it's like, I know that all these universities in that region were plantations.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I was asking because like all of this, like we're trying to understand, like with your school system, it's like really hard to understand, like how does it work with loans and who is getting what and why and how it seems
it's like a business. It's just a business.
Why is it so expensive?
Why? Because it's like completely ununderstandable for us. Like in Europe, most schools are like around 1,000 euros or like maybe more, it depends on the country, but like here it used to be free. Now it's around like 1,000 or 2,000 euros per year, which is like a big difference. I mean, that's huge money here for most people, but still it's not 100,000 euros.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I
100,000 for their whole life. So it's like,
Yeah.
yes, I think that if I have a kid and then the system here has not changed by the time they want to go to college, like I would suggest they look overseas maybe, because I just don't know if I believe in the system here that the money that you're paying is worth the product that you're getting, perhaps. Because I mean, yeah, it's just like going into debt, like it just doesn't seem like a good thing for a young person.
What do you think? Why more people don't go to Europe, for example, to study? Is it that they don't really understand what is it that is out there, or is there any benefit if you have a degree from the United States and you're planning your life to continue in the United States?
I don't know. I do think that maybe it is like the wanting to have a degree from an institution here, thinking that that can help you later. I mean, I think a lot of people are also don't always like leave their state or, you know, want to go that far from home as well. I do think also like there is this, and maybe this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like the NBA, those players are the best. And like, how could Tony Kukoc be in the NBA and things like that, is that there's just this mentality of like, if it's in the United States or like that we, or maybe like raised to believe like this is better than in another place. I'm going to get a better education here than I might somewhere else, which I mean, of course, there's always going to be cases of that in different circumstances over here, over there. But I think that there's this there's this mentality of like, our schools are better. Which I am not at all saying is true. It's just, I think that there's this understanding that there's kind of like a narrative like that.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like a belief that like we usually, I think like mostly people can't really perceive, even here. I think like for us, it was also like, we cannot, for example, when I was studying art, I wasn't able to understand what it means studying art somewhere else, because it's a really different system. Like at that time here was like really one narrative, what it means to be an artist. And it took me a long time like to finish studies and to start exploring by myself to understand in which ways I can be an artist. So I was trained as a painter, and then now I consider myself multimedia artist because I'm doing all these things that I wasn't doing while I was studying. So I think it's similar with other things. Like we all have like one belief that it comes from our surroundings. And I mean, like you're lucky that your surrounding is much bigger. So like in that way, like people have like more options from start, but still, I think that's also like a trap that like you're trapped to believe that is the only best way.
Yes,
like I don't think you should come study in Serbia, but generally in Europe, I think there are more different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many sides to it, but it seems, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who make the decision to study in another country, and that they are, I mean, that is a benefit to them, just as maybe studying here. But I think that there is like something that's kind of like implanted a little bit, like this is a good place to go to school. Or, you know, a lot of people, like, you know, if your parent went to a certain college, like they have a connection there. And if you still grew up in the area where the place where your parent went to college, that's part of their identity. You know, it's like, it's kind of twisted how much, because it's like, it is a nice thing that's a college. It's also just a business that's trying to make money and like brand you with their like logo and their, you know, to like profit off of that, so that you know, as an alumni of that program feel beholden, or, you know. So I think that like, it can be kind of like a family thing too. College can become a family thing that you like are tied to. If yeah, I mean, it depends on the school and the place, and really the state. A lot of the public universities can be more affordable, relatively speaking, than private schools. But of course, expenses for living and things like that. So you could go to a public college in New York City, but then you pay for your rent, you pay for your food, you pay for your Metro card, you pay for, you know, everything else. It's like, then it's expensive, no matter how much the tuition is.
Okay, so I think we could talk for hours more. Unfortunately, we have to end it now, but we're so happy that we did this interview and that we had you for virtual residency, and we're so looking forward to have you in Belgrade soon. And of course, we're staying in touch. I will link everything up in this interview on YouTube. You will send me all the details that you want to share, like your Instagram or website and this podcast that you were mentioning, so we can just connect you with everyone. And yeah, so do you want to add anything? I think like yeah, I'm just happy that we did this. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm happy too, and I feel like I'm really excited to learn more and get the chance to come to Belgrade. I also feel really lucky to have gotten to know both of you throughout this process. Like, you're fun, interesting people that want to have discussions about a lot of things that I want to have discussions about, and it's so exciting to me that we know each other.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll be in touch.
Okay, yes, we're keeping in touch.
Okay.
See you
Okay.
soon then.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.